Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and with the summer season fully kicking into high gear, I felt like it was time to do another catch-up review. Now, initially, I didn't really have a lot of films to talk about here because I'm trying not to watch as many as I did last year so I can be just as up-to-date with movies and TV, but I actually do have quite a few to talk about here. There's a lot of movies that I have watched this year that I just have not had the time to review, whether it was I just didn't have the time to review them, I had the inability because my computer wasn't here, or I just didn't have. Either way, there's a lot of movies to talk about here, so we're just getting into it right now, starting off with the first movie. And starting off, we have a film that I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting anxiously for me to review because of how much I was dreading it, and that, of course, is What Men Want. Look, I saw this movie in theaters. I was planning on avoiding it, but there was so much that came out that week that I just figured, fuck it. I gotta see it eventually. Might as well just finally just watch it, and look, was it as bad as I was expecting? No, but it's still really bad. There's a lot that I really hate about this movie. Starting off with just the plot in general is so dumb, and you think maybe that comes from her, maybe like, falling on something or her running into something. Let me tell you how she actually gets into that coma. So her friends have this like condom balloon, right? And like they're going to like this like bridal shower or whatever, and they bring this balloon. Taraji Henson gets hit in the back with the condom, and then she falls flat on her face onto the table, and that's how she ends up in a coma. So that's the kind of movie we're watching here. That alone should tell you what kind of movie this is going to be. And look, this is an extremely dumb movie. However, it is not, as I would say, offensive towards. It's not one of those movies where like every man is stupid. Actually, it's the other way around. Taraji P. Henson ends up coming off pretty bad here. The fact that she has this gift and she can hear all of these men's thoughts and things like that, she takes that to her advantage. And there's one relation, especially with Aldis Hodge, the way that plays out, I don't know why he is so forgiving towards her when he starts to find out certain things. I really don't understand it. I mean, if this were to happen in real life, chances are things would not go nearly as well as they do for Henson in this film, and that was definitely something that really pissed me off. There are so many annoying scenes here. I will say I actually did kind of like the storyline between Tracy Morgan and his son. There's a kind of sweet storyline there, but that is so underdeveloped. We rarely get anything with them, and I wish that we got a little bit more into that story because that's the one part of the movie I did like. Other than that, I hated her group of friends. I thought they were really annoying. At the same time, though, when they start to call her out on things, it's like, yeah, call her out on that, because honestly, like I said, Taraji P. Henson's character is rather unlikable here. Every single guy in her workplace, though, they kind of fit that whole every man is a dick sort of thing that we see. I mean, eventually some of them come around, but not really. You also have the very stereotypical gay best friend who I just did not care about at all. It's not funny. It also has one of the worst scenes of the year in this church. I don't want to get into it too much, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Either way, while I hated this one, I didn't hate it as much as I expected to. It is honestly more of a forgettably bad sort of film, but it still is really bad overall. I'd give this one a D+. I think acting-wise, it's not bad. Taraji P. Henson does a good job. There are some actors that are pretty bad here. The kid especially, I thought was terrible. I hated the child actor here. But I didn't mind the Tracy Morgan story and things like that, but it's definitely not anything I would say is worth seeing. I think definitely this is one of those films that's like people are surprised it isn't as bad as they think it is, but in reality, it's still pretty bad overall. Paddleton, I pretty much loved. This film kind of came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't really expecting that much from it, but this is honestly a really heart-wrenching story about these two friends, and from the beginning, I mean, you know that Mark Duplass's character is planning on killing himself. You know, he has this cancer, he doesn't want to suffer, and he just wants to end it all, and this is something that does happen quite a lot, but I like that we got to cover it here. That's not really an aspect that you get to see in many films, and it's done extremely well here. What I really like about this movie, though, is it does not try to make it over dramatic. In fact, the film does not get that heavily dramatic until I would say its final act, which is absolutely crushing. But up till then, it's a really sweet story about these two friends and how much they've helped each other, but also the things that they wish could have happened to them. There's a really great scene where they're talking about, the way their lives have gone, which I really did enjoy. I gotta say, though, man, Ray Romano gives maybe the best work I've ever seen from him, especially in the last, 20 to 30 minutes. Just remarkable. Honestly, remarkable. If it was up to me, he would be nominated for a supporting actor Oscar right now, because I really do think he is that good here. He has to make some tough choices towards the end of this movie, and I just loved what he was able to do. It was so raw, it was so emotional. Him and Duplass have some really great chemistry. I do think this one does suffer a bit in its second act. It does drag a little bit overall, but for the most part, I really enjoyed this one a lot. I give this one a B. If you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely worth checking out. It's not an easy watch for sure, but it's one that I think is definitely worth checking out. Greta is another one that I originally planned to do a very long review for, but I just didn't really have a lot to say. This movie is decent. I will say this. The acting here is really great. Chloe Grace Moretz and especially Isabelle Huppert, they both do a very good job here. Chloe Grace Moretz, sure, she is kind of playing that naive sort of character that you're like, why are you buying into this? But because of what she's going through, it's a little bit easier to understand why she's so susceptible to what Greta is doing, and I think they do a good job with that overall, and that's something that, again, I thought was very good. If Moretz wasn't in this role, I don't think the movie would be quite as good as it is. I gotta say, though, Isabelle Huppert, I mean, she completely steals this entire film. I thought she did such an incredible job. Greta is someone who you understand where she's coming from, but you're also utterly terrified of her, and I thought she did a good job representing both sides. Megan Monroe, I thought, also had a really good supporting actress performance, especially towards the end of this movie. There's one moment with her that I thought was just so badass, and I absolutely loved it. There's a nice story there with Colm Feore as well, and him and Chloe Grace Moretz trying to reconnect, which I thought was really well done. It's really just that this movie comes off feeling rather predictable. There isn't really a lot that happens that is necessarily shocking here. There's really only one moment that did get me in terms of shocking. It's not really scary either. You pretty much know where it's going to go. There is one scene that I thought was kind of disturbing in the way it was done, but for the most part, it is a film that you have seen before, and I can understand if that does hinder the film for you. For me, there was enough in there for me to say I enjoyed it. Is it something I'd ever go back to again? Probably not, but for what it was, I thought it was really well done. It's definitely a little bit better than most of these sort of like stalker sort of thrillers, and I thought they did a good job crafting it overall. I give this one a B-. It's not a must-see, but it's one that if you were wary about it, I'd say maybe check it out, because it did surprise me a bit. The Hole in the Ground, while I don't think it's as good as, say, like Hereditary or something like that, is still a really well done horror film about confronting your past and all these sort of things that may haunt you, and I thought they did a really great job. That the two lead performances especially really do stand out here, especially when it comes to Sienna Kerslake, our main character here. I thought she was phenomenal. I love what she was able to do. The situation she's dealing with, you really do feel it. The action that she does take, you really do feel her desperation, and I thought overall she was just fantastic. I really love what she was able to do. James Quinn McGhie also, really great child performance. He's very haunting, but you also really do feel bad for this character. Even when he starts to turn towards darkness, you kind of feel for him as well, and their relationship really does carry the entire film, and they do a very good job with that. It is definitely a slow burn, and I can understand if some people do get bored, but the third act of this movie, I think, is going to win you over in the end. I thought the third act was so cool, the way it's played out. It's very creative. It's different than most horror films. It does not go in the direction you think it's going to. The first two acts, you may have an idea of how it's going to go. It really doesn't. It goes into some uncharted territory, which I really did love. The film is trying to say something a lot deeper than just it's a possession thriller. It's a lot more than that. I don't really want to get into what it's really about, but either way, I thought Lee Cronin did a really great job directing-wise. The cinematography here is just absolutely gorgeous. It's very eerie and dark, and they do a very good job encapsulating that throughout the entire film. Overall, this is just another really effective film from A24 in terms of horror, and it really does show why I think that genre in particular is one of their biggest strengths for sure. It's not, like I said, on the level of The Witch or Hereditary, but overall, it is definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it already. Isn't It Romantic was not as painful as a lot of people might expected it to be. It's mainly what I thought it was going to be. I will say it's a little bit better. It's not as obnoxious as you may expect, and it is trying to do something different. It's trying to sort of lambast at, romantic comedies and things like that, and it does do a good job of that, but I'm not going to lie, for the duration, I just kind of thought of that Crazy Ex-Girlfriend episode that, parody romantic comedies and how much better they did here, because honestly, there are parts of this movie where, yes, they will make fun of it, but there are also points where it feels like they want you to take it seriously. And I don't really feel like they had a very good grip on that altogether. Rebel Wilson is actually really good here. I thought she was very well casted. She really is the audience in a way where she's just as confused and weirded out as things as we are, and I thought she did a very good job. I actually liked her chemistry with Liam Hemsworth for the most part. I thought those two worked well together. Adam Devine, I thought was pretty good here. Not all the acting great. Prakana Chopra, I mean, I just don't think she's a very good actress. I thought she was kind of miscasted here. It seemed like the only reason that they really did get her is just because they wanted to get someone who's attractive. They didn't really have a specific reasoning for it, but they got her here. Also, whoever plays the stereotypical gay best friend, awful. Honestly, awful. One of the worst performances of the entire year for me. I thought he was so annoying. The film, again, it's not bad. It really isn't. But whenever he came in, it was honestly insufferable. It's characters like him that really do hold this film back for me, because there are things I really do like. There are things I like that this film is trying to say, but unfortunately, it's just very mediocre. It's very forgettable. Also, without spoiling anything, where the character ends up going, I don't really think she changes that much over time through this experience. Maybe it's just me, maybe I missed something, but overall, I appreciate what it's trying to do, but as a film, it largely did fall flat for me. It's not as bad as I think a lot of people might have expected it to be. I never really thought it was going to be that bad in the first place, but it's about as mediocre and harmless of a romantic comedy. Piercing is definitely a contender for one of the most boring films I have seen so far this year. This film at first, is very intriguing. This idea that you have this guy and he is telling his wife that he's going on this business trip, but secretly he plans to kill this girl and things like that, but this girl turns out to be way crazier than you'd expect. At first, that's a really intriguing concept. The problem is, this film has no idea what to do with it. I mean, after a while, this is just this girl torturing this guy incessantly or vice versa, and it just becomes really tiresome after a while. Also, as much as I do like Mia Wasikowska, I really thought she was overdoing it here. I really wasn't a big fan of her. I like Christopher Abbott. I thought overall he did a good job in this film. I thought definitely his performance was pretty good. Leia Costa also does a very good job, but overall, the way the film concludes, especially, it just makes the whole thing very unnecessary. This feels like something that would work a lot better as a short film. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was a short film before, and I feel like they should have just left it at that. This is just something that simply does not stretch out to a theatrical length. After, I would say, 30 to 40 minutes of this film, it just becomes very tiresome and very repetitive, and you're wondering why you're even watching it. I mean, really, the only reason I watched it is because I was initially intrigued by its concept, and I wanted to see where it was going to go, but also I wanted to talk about in this catch-up review, and honestly, it's really not worth your time. I don't think it's anything that really is all that great. It's not terrible or anything, but it's just a very unnecessary film where you're just kind of sitting there like, why am I watching this? Like, there are so many other films that I could be watching. Why am I spending my time watching something this pointless and this unnecessary? What is this film trying to say? It's not really trying to say much at all. This just seems like one of those films that a really creative concept, but they just had no idea where to go with it overall. So I give this one like a C-. Like I said, it's not terrible or anything. I just really was very let down by it, and really at the end of the day was questioning why I even was wanting to watch it in the first place. Gloria Bell, I really do love. I do think it's a little bit overhyped in terms of how much people really do love it, but I still think it is a very well done film. Julianne Moore gives one of the best performances I think we've ever seen from her. She was born to play this role for sure, someone who is aging and is trying to feel lively again, but at the same time, she is getting older. There's a lot of things that are changing. Her children are moving away and things like that, and I think they do a very good job exploring that part of her trying to get more in touch with her younger self. Can she still live again and things like that. She has this demanding job, and I thought that was really great. Her relation with John Turturro, I thought also was very well explored. I really enjoyed this stuff between those two. I thought overall they did a very good job with showing that maybe these two can survive, but also showing that John Turturro's character, he also has his own problems he's struggling with family-wise, and I thought they did a very good job with setting that up. There's a lot of great stuff with her and her kids. Their whole relation was really great. Brad Garrett, also not in the movie a lot, but I liked what they did with his character as well. There's just a lot of great stuff with this film. The only thing that really holds it back for me, because look, there's a lot of things I really do love about it, and I was really adoring it for a while. There's a direction they take in the third act of this film, and it just felt rather lazy. I didn't really like the story that they were trying to tell there. A lot of people seem to disagree with me, but for me, it just felt like a cop-out. Like, it felt like they had something really interesting going, and then they just kind of, like, decided, oh, the movie needs to end, and then they just made this choice that just, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. The ending, though, I will say, the last, like, 10 minutes is perfect. I love the way the movie ends. It has a really great message of, even though you are older, it doesn't mean that you can't still live. You still have a long way to go in your life. There's still a lot of fun stuff you can do, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone, basically, pigeonhole you to a certain thing that you can do. Don't let them do that. Do whatever you want to do, and I think that's a really great message overall. It's very liberating in that sense. Julianne Moore does an incredible job in this role, and overall, it's just a very positive film that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy overall. It's definitely worth the praise, McGhie. Like I said, I just think that third act, there's that one choice that just didn't really work for me and kind of soured the film overall, but I still really did love this one. It's a B+ for me. Definitely worth checking out for sure. The Highwaymen is easily one of the most disappointing films of the entire year for me. This was a concept that I thought was really interesting. This idea that we have Bonnie and Clyde, but we're not focusing on them. We're focusing on the people that we're trying to catch them. And sort of that sort of struggle with, these two gangsters who were just constantly on top of things. They seem pretty unbeatable in that sense. These two were going to finally bring them to justice. And obviously we know how it's going to end, but I thought there was a lot you could do there. And what do we get? Well, not that much. There's really not that much of a story to tell here. And that's the biggest problem with this movie, is that there just isn't a lot they do with this overall. There's definitely ideas that they play with, like there's stuff that happened in Kevin Costner's past that we do get into, and choices that he's made and things like that. There's a whole thing going on with him and his wife, and that his wife doesn't really want him to be, doing this job, but he feels it's like imperative to, and things like that. Him and Woody Harrelson do have good chemistry. They do work well together overall. The problem is that as characters, they're just not very interesting. There's not a lot that they really do with them. There's not a lot that we learn that is really all that important. And honestly, the whole time, you also have Kathy Bates' character who, is trying to wrangle up all these people and is trying to figure out, are Bonnie and Clyde justified in what they're doing? Is it possible for us to go after them? And that story felt a lot more interesting to me. I wish we focused on that part of the story rather than these two cops who just aren't really doing much of anything. It also doesn't help that because of the fact that we know what's going to happen, there is no tension here. You never feel like things are on the line for these two. You never really feel like this isn't going to work out because you already know what's going to happen to Bonnie and Clyde, who I should also mention are not really characters in this film. We don't really see them physically in this film until like the last 5 minutes. Up until then, it's just like brief glimpses. Like you'll see like a silhouette, or you'll see a hand, or you'll just see them holding a gun. You don't actually get to see them, and I thought it was a really interesting idea at first. But again, we know who Bonnie and Clyde are, so I don't really know what they're trying to hide here. It was an interesting artistic choice for sure, but it just didn't really do much of anything, and I think it would have actually helped if we would have gotten to see them before they are eventually brought to justice. I would have liked to see at least 1 or 2 scenes of them in action, seeing them being badasses and things like that. Obviously you want to do what you can to not rewrite history. I'm not saying that you want to do that, but I just thought there was a more interesting way to tell the story, and this film just did not utilize it that well. Overall, I was very let down by this film. I typically do like John Lee Hancock. I love St. Mr. Banks. Blind Spot, I think, is extremely underrated. Or Blind Side, not Blind Spot. The Blind Side, I think, is extremely underrated. And this film just really disappointed me. It didn't really do much of anything. It's not boring necessarily, but it's just one of those films where it had such an interesting concept, but I just don't really feel like there was much of a story to tell here. It didn't really change anything. It was a good idea, and it definitely was something different. I will give them that. But really, you're better off watching adaptations of Bonnie and Clyde. Like, the whole time I was just thinking, I wished I was watching the Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway Bonnie and Clyde, or even the musical Bonnie and Clyde, or the mini-series that came on to Lifetime. You're better watching those adaptations, because those actually tell a really good story. This, on the other hand, it's just really kind of hard to sit through. It's really long. It feels like it goes on for 3 hours, and just in general, it doesn't really amount to much of anything. It's just one of those movies that had an interesting concept, but they just didn't really do much with it. So overall, this one's like a C. There's not really much else to say about it, and it really let me down overall. Definitely, like I said, one of the most disappointing of the year so far for me. So while I just talked about a film that I think is very, disappointing, this film, on the other hand, I think is very overlooked. I don't think enough people are talking about The Mustang. This is a film that I very much did love, really about this man who, he's trying to do better. He's made a lot of, he's made a lot of mistakes in his life. He's gotten himself into jail. He's not in a very good state. He doesn't have a very good relation with his daughter, and he's trying to get better. He's trying to turn things around, and the way he plans to do that is by befriending this horse. This horse and him, they have this really great bond, not just because of the fact that there is this auction going on, but also because he starts to feel like he has this connection to this horse, and that the horse may be the way for him to turn his life around. I gotta say, Matthias Schoenaerts is probably the best I've ever seen him here. He has one scene especially in this jail cell, and he's kind of like freaking out, and I'll just say it right now, like that's easily one of the best scenes I've seen so far this year. I mean, I thought he did such an incredible job there. I loved what he brought to this film overall. And Gideon Adlin also, let me just say, she has really been impressing me lately. Between this and Blockers, I definitely want to see more of her. I think she's such a fantastic rising star, and this film definitely shows that. The scenes between her, she's not in the movie very much, but the scenes she has with Schoenaerts, they're very sad, because these two, you can tell they could have had a very good relation, but because of things that he's done, which I don't want to spoil what specifically he's done, but he's done something that is basically unforgivable. Like, even if he wanted to have a good relation with her, I don't think she's ever going to get there. I mean, the things that he's done, it's not something that you can really come back from, and he's never going to have that relationship that he wants with her. That being said, it is still very sad to see, and you see that regret in him. You feel that even though he did this terrible thing, and you should feel like, he's just a terrible person, you can tell he is trying to get better, and I think they did a very good job with showing that for sure. The auction scene in general, it's very shocking where it ends up going. I thought they definitely did a good job with that. And the ending of the movie, I mean, it doesn't really end in the most hopeful place. It ends in a way where it is sort of hopeful, but it also is kind of sad where it ends up going. I don't really want to get into that too much. The cinematography here, though, is phenomenal. They did a really great job of shedding light on something that I don't really know a lot about. I haven't really heard a lot of stories about prison auctions and things like that with these horses. I think it's a very interesting story where they end up going with that. Bruce Stern also is just fantastic here, as he is in everything, but I thought he just did such a great job. Really, the only thing that holds this movie back for me, from calling it like one of the best of the year, is this subplot. There's this subplot involving Jason Mitchell, whose name we don't really want to hear right now, but regardless, he is in this movie. But it involves him and this, like, sort of drug running thing that's going on, and I felt like that could have been cut from the movie entirely. I didn't see the point of it. It didn't really amount to much of anything. Once a certain direction happens, I honestly kind of forgot that it was even in the movie to begin with. And really, when the movie shines, though, it's when it's focused on Schoenaerts and this horse, and him trying to do better in his life, him trying to turn things around, him trying to, see the error of his ways and things like that, and I think it very much does work at that. So I really did adore this one a lot. This one I think would get an A-. It's one that I really do wish more people were talking about. I really haven't seen it doing well, like box office wise or things like that, but it's one of those small indie films that I think definitely is worth checking out for sure. It's going to go under the radar, but I really did adore it. More than I expected to, definitely, because this is not usually my kind of movie, but I thought it was very touching, and it's definitely worth checking out. Native Son was a film I was actually really looking forward to. I thought it had a very interesting premise behind it, and when I heard, it wasn't doing as well, I was a little bit surprised. When it started off, I was really enjoying it. I thought it told a very good story about sort of how we have a certain expectation of people, and especially when you look at Ashton Sanders' character. I mean, this is a guy that, yes, he is black, but he is not involved in any gang violence. He doesn't really like rap music and things like that. He's into jazz, which I think is a very interesting sort of place to take him, and it's just he goes against the grain of certain stereotypes, and I think that's a really great idea. The way that people view him and the way that they're viewed is altered because of that. I really did like his relation with Margaret Qualley. I thought was also really well done. Margaret Qualley, as usual, I mean, she's fantastic in everything, but she did a really great job in this film. I really like their sort of relation they develop. It starts off, and clearly she's just kind of using him, but you see as the film goes on, there's a genuine connection that starts to spark there, and I thought they did a good job with that for sure. I like the role that Nick Robinson was playing. He plays a very interesting kind of character. Some people are going to like him, some people aren't going to, but it was a very different role for him, and I thought he definitely nailed it for sure. So like I said, I was really enjoying the film. They did a good job with even showing, Qualley's parents and things like that and how they feel about the whole situation. And then it takes a turn. Something happens and it goes in a certain direction, and the whole film basically changed for me. My entire view of the film changed. It went from a film that I thought was telling a very compelling story, and then went something far more generic, and almost felt like it was backtracking and saying, oh, no, 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 that's actually not the story we're trying to tell. And it felt like the message of the movie just got so muddled. It felt almost like this film was trying to say that, like, what people are saying about Sanders' character is true and things like that. And I just don't really like that sort of thing, especially where the film ends up going in towards the end. I thought it was extremely unsatisfying. I don't know, maybe it just went over my head, but just for me, I thought the movie started off telling a very interesting story, and then it just didn't know where to go. It felt like it was kind of lost, and just in general, I don't think it really worked all that well. I feel like they needed to. It also doesn't help that when the shift happens, there's only about 30 to 40 minutes of movie left, and a lot of the decisions the characters start to make, they just don't make sense with what we've seen prior. It's too big of a shift. They really needed to spend more time for me to really buy into it, and for me to really get behind these actions of the characters. Because there's so little time, they just aren't able to do that, and that was very disappointing for me. So, like I said, there are things I do like about this film, mainly in the first half. Also, Kiki Lane, I really liked their relationship as well, and I didn't really like where it ended up going, but I did like their relationship in the beginning, and I thought it was really cool to see her too. So a lot of great actors, but they just don't really have a lot to do here they don't really utilize them all that well. Ashton Sanders is phenomenal throughout the entire movie. It's probably the best performance I've seen from him for sure, but just in general, I wanted a lot more from this, and it just didn't really give it to me. The first two acts are really good, but the third act is really where I took a lot of issue with, and it really just made me wonder what the entire point of the movie, what they were really trying to say, like, what's the overlying message of this movie at the end of the day. I really have a hard time putting my finger on it, and that really did lessen the film for me. I didn't hate it or anything. I still think it's an alright film. It's a C+ at best, but I feel like it could have been a lot better had they spent more time on this certain decision that a character ends up making. Unicorn Store is the definition of just a really fun, positive movie. It's not trying to be anything more than that, and I really do appreciate that. I think Brie Larson's directing, it's a lot of fun. It's very quirky and things like that, and she does a really good job of very heavily, relying on this more mystical sort of narrative, but it also tells a very good story about not being afraid to, not grow up. I mean, the character of Kit, she's not like your typical adult. I mean, she still has her youth and she retains that innocence. And a lot of people are very thrown off by that. They want her to have a job. They want her to have a boyfriend, but she's not that interested in that stuff. She is much more interested in this fantastical sort of element. She's much more interested in just having fun. And, she does eventually want to have a job and impress her parents. But I thought overall they did some really great stuff with that. Brie Larson is fantastic as always. But I really like the story between her and her parents as well, where they end up going. going with that, and because of, they're not really supportive of the choices she's making. They have a certain expectation of her, and she's not living up to it, and there's a great scene, especially where she kind of calls them out on that, and I thought that Bradley Whitford and Joan Cusack just did such a great job as her parents. I really did love them here. I also really like Mamadou Athie, this character that she starts to sort of fall for, and this relationship they start to form, I thought was really sweet overall. I definitely really did like it. Sam Jackson is not in this movie as much as you might expect, but I thought he was definitely in it enough. They did a good job with him. I liked what they were trying to do there overall, and I definitely did enjoy where the film ended up going. Because, again, you're going to have a lot of questions of, like, is this true? Is this not? But where it ends up going, I thought was definitely very well done. My only, like, real flaws with the film, I feel like there was one character that, Karan Sony's character, he just didn't really feel like he had a lot to do. I feel like they could have done more with him, and I was a little let down by that. And the way the movie ended, while I did think it was good, it did feel a little abrupt to me. I feel like they could have dived into it just a bit more, but overall, I still really enjoyed this one. This is just the definition of a really fun movie. It's not trying to be anything more than that, and I think overall, that's where this film really does succeed. I give this one like a B. I think Brie Larson really does have a future as a director, and small films like this very much do show that. Missing Link is another really fun, positive movie. There's not really a lot to say about it. It's a film that I definitely did enjoy a lot. It's very creative and fun, but it also does actually have some really good characters. Hugh Jackman's character in particular, I mean, the way he starts things off, yeah, he is very self-indulgent. Yes, he really is kind of a phony. He really is only looking to, go after come after the missing link, just because, just for profit reasons. He's really just looking for capital in that sense. But where he ends up going as a character, I thought was really well done. The relation between him and Susan, that budding relation that they have, I thought was really great. Zach Galifianakis and Hugh Jackman have some really great interplay throughout the film, and I really did enjoy them here as well. Zoe Saldana also is a badass here. I thought she was definitely a lot of fun, kind of like a female Indiana Jones in a way, and I thought she definitely did a really great job. And the animation also is stellar here. I mean, it's Leica, you would expect it to look really great, and it definitely does look really great. They do a very good job with the animation. It blends in nicely with all the characters. It has a really nice feel to it, and that's something I very much did enjoy. In terms of flaws, I do think the film is underwritten in some aspects. The film has a hard time grasping onto its main villain. There's a lot of characters here that seem like they could be the main threat, but they're not. And then, especially towards the end, it was kind of confusing as to who the main threat was. Who the main threat ended up being, I really wasn't a fan of at all. I thought he was honestly pretty annoying and had a very one-dimensional motivation. But there were some characters I really did appreciate, like Timothy Olyphant is a really good secondary antagonist, and I enjoyed him overall. And also, much as I did enjoy Zoe Saldana, I felt like they could have done more with her as a character. But overall, this is just a really fun, positive, animated movie. I really do wish more people saw it because I think it's very well done. I think Leica, sure, it's not nearly as complex as some of their other films, but it's really cute. It's very solid, and I think overall, it's definitely worth checking out. It has some good things to say as well about, like, about gender confusion and things like that. And that's something else that I thought was definitely very well done here. This idea that he wants to be called Susan, and he's okay with that, and sort of him identifying his, not necessarily sexuality, but identifying, this name that is typically feminine, and him actually using it, I thought was also really well done. Just a lot of great stuff in this film for sure. I definitely give this one a B. I think it's definitely worth checking out, and I wish more people saw it, because I think, like I said, it's a really good, solid kids film overall. When I first heard that Donald Glover was going to do Guava Island, I was a little bit wary because it seemed to me like it was just going to be something in the vein of, like, other sort of concept sort of films that artists have made, but really it's just a collection of songs, and I was hoping it wasn't that. And look, the problem with this movie is not that. If it was just that, that would be fine. The problem is the film can't decide on if it's trying to tell a story or if it's just trying to be a concert film. I will say, Donald Glover, as usual, is fantastic here. He's phenomenal in everything. He's one of the best actors out there. He's one of the best talents out there, and I think he did a very good job with that. There's one sequence in particular where he uses This Is America, which I thought was very creative. I liked the way that was done, and I thought he did a good job with that. The problem is what he wants to do with the story. As a writer, he leaves a lot to be desired. The film is very underwritten. The film only clocks in at, I think, like 40 minutes or something like that, and you really can tell how much more time they needed to flesh out this story, how much more time they need, especially a direction where they end up taking a certain character in the third act. It's just not something that you really care about. You should feel a lot for what happens, and it should be something where it's like, holy shit, I'm so devastated that this happened, but you don't really feel anything because they don't really devote enough time to the story. The film, a lot of the time, feels like it's just a collection of songs. It feels very much like Donald Glover was just using this to capitalize on his success, and in general, I think the intention was not that. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, the film is just Donald Glover sucking his own dick, and I don't think that's what it is. I think what Donald Glover planned to do is that him and Rihanna, they went on vacation, they were spending time together, and they're like, you know what, let's make a movie. Let's make a movie out of this. We don't get to see each other a lot. A lot of people are going to like it if we work together. And again, those two do have very good chemistry. Like, what we see of them, they do work well together, but they don't have enough, I feel like. There's not enough with their relationship. It's kind of just talked about. Like, we hear about it in passing. We don't really get to see a lot of it. There's only like 2 or 3 scenes that the two of them have together, and that was a little bit disappointing, especially considering how good Rihanna really is in the film. But it very much felt like this was just something they made because they were on vacation, and they wanted to release it before Coachella. It feels very rushed in that sense. I feel like they could have spent a lot more time into it. I feel like if he really wanted to tell this story, which is an important story, I'm not saying it isn't, it's just, I don't think the film deserved, did enough to really deserve the ending that it got. I don't think it did, at least for me. I don't think it deserved that direction. I don't think it showed why it needed to go in that direction. I feel like they need a lot more time to take it in such a serious, dark direction, because it is trying to shed a light on a lot of issues that I think are very important, but it just doesn't spend enough time to really dive headfirst into them. There's also this thing with Rihanna in the beginning. There's sort of like this prophecy that really ends up being a lot of nothing. I don't really understand what it was about. Overall, this was very disappointing for me. I think there's definitely things that I like here, but a lot of the time, it just kind of feels like one of those things where it's not really a movie, but it's trying to be a movie. It's really confusing over what this really is. Either way, I didn't really like it that much. You're much better off just listening to Childish Gambino songs and things like that. I give this one a C. It's a valiant attempt, but it really did not do much of anything for me. So The Curse of La Llorona, this was one that I was planning on doing a full review for, but because I didn't have my laptop in my possession, I unfortunately was not able to. And honestly, I'm not too upset because I really don't have a lot to say about it. This is about as generic of a horror film as I think it can possibly get. There's so many jump scares that are just not scary at all. The story and the central story is really not that great. I will say, though, the film started off kind of promising. They do a good job of really introducing the main family here. Linda Cardellini is fantastic as always. I thought she actually did a really great job here. I did like the kids at first. I thought they did a good job with them, but once we got into the central story, it just got very tiring and boring after a while. I really wasn't into it. The kids also really started to go south for me. There's one direction especially involving the little girl, and I don't know what they were thinking. I really don't. Like, it is one of the most baffling things I have seen all year. I have no idea why they went in that direction. Like I said, it's not scary at all. There are so many moments where I should be terrified, but I'm just not. There's also not really a very good motive. There is sort of a motivation for La Llorona, I will say that, but they still don't do a very good job of, like, what is her initial plan? They don't really flesh that out that much. We kind of just hear about it in passing, and I think they could have done a much better job with that. The Conjuring connection also feels entirely superfluous. It feels like something that is just added to the story just so people will see the movie because they knew the movie wasn't going to be all that popular, and they wanted people to see it because they thought that saying it's a Conjuring movie would make more people want to see it and things like that. Really, it adds absolutely nothing. Just in general, this just feels like a very generic horror film. There really isn't much else to it. A lot of people seem to like the priest that comes in. They thought he was a lot of fun, and I thought he was alright, but he didn't really do much of anything for me. Just in general, I really did not like this at all. I found it rather boring, and it was just one of those films where I just got very tired with it very quickly. I didn't hate it or anything, but I just really didn't like it at all. C- for this one. Again, it's about as generic of a horror film as I think we can get these days. Teen Spirit is one I was very much looking forward to, and it definitely didn't disappoint. Elle Fanning, I think, gives maybe the best performance I've seen from her so far. She completely transforms into this character, and my word, can she sing. I mean, we've heard her sing in other films, but trust me, you do not know how talented of a singer she is until you've seen this movie. Just goddamn, she is absolutely incredible, and I loved what she was able to do here. Her and Zlatko Beric, I thought, had some really great chemistry too. They do a good job of getting into his character and why he is so supportive of Elle Fanning, because really no one else in her family is that supportive of her doing this singing competition. You see why he has a lot more confidence in her and why he wants her to become this very successful, singer and things like that, and this solo artist, and I thought they did a good job with that for sure. The problem with the movie is that it is fairly generic. This is very much just a very basic, teenage girl enters singing competition, and every single thing that you could think of that happens in this movie. It doesn't really go into anywhere that's surprising. The ending is extremely predictable. I think it's also quite underwritten at points, and look, I really did enjoy the film because of Elle Fanning and Zlatko Beric, but honestly, if they weren't in it, I don't think I would like this film as much as I did. It is fairly generic. It definitely has a lot of cliches that you expect in this film. A lot of the characters, for me personally, they felt very one-note. They just didn't feel like very three-dimensional characters. But overall, I'm able to overlook it at the end of the day, mainly because, again, of how good those two central performances are. The music is great, the central story you do care about overall, and there's a good motivation for why Fanning wants to sing and things like that, and I think they do a good job with that overall, and why there is this stipulation that is holding her back from doing it, and why she feels like she has to be in this competition now. So they do a good job with that. It's just, overall, it is a fairly generic movie, and I can understand if people don't like it for that reason. But overall, I definitely did enjoy it. I give this one a B-. Again, it's nothing you have to rush out and see, but I definitely think in terms of Elle Fanning, like, this is easily her strongest performance yet, and I think that alone is enough of a reason to check it out. Look, there's a lot of films on this list that I'm mainly talking because I don't really have a lot to say about them, and most of the films in here, like, they're ranging from just okay to good. A Vigilante is one of the few on here that I genuinely loved, and I very much encourage all of you to see. This is a film that is relatively small, and really is a very simple concept. You have Olivia Wilde, someone who is clearly someone who is in a very domestic abusive relationship. She is a real victim of that, and she's trying to get away from it, and she is now this vigilante that is trying to go after people who are in similar situations, and they do a good job with that premise, but the film is a lot more than just that. It's not just her trying to track down, the husband that was abusing her, and hopefully finally putting an end to it once and for all. There's a lot more going on the film has to say about someone who is in a very abusive relationship and how hard it can be for them to get out of it, and why someone has to stay in a relationship like that. And I thought the social commentary there was very well done. It helps that I'm pretty sure a lot of these actors aren't actors. From what I understand, they actually did get people who were actually in abusive relationships, and they were in this film, and I think they did a really great job with shedding a light on that. There's one scene in particular that honestly really did get to me, because it's not acting. It's clear that this did happen to this woman, and they just do such a great job with showing, like, why they are in these relationships. Olivia Wilde gives probably the best work I've ever seen from her. I thought she was phenomenal in this movie. She's definitely, when it comes to the Oscars, I mean, obviously it's early, but I think she's definitely going to get overlooked in terms of performances, because she is just remarkable here, especially towards the end of this film. She has some real standout stuff. You understand the tragedy that she's going through, why she can't get out of this situation, but also how much it's affected her, and how much she has changed from it since when we see her in these flashbacks, and they do a really great job with that for sure. The film is very intense. It does go in a direction that is fairly predictable, but overall, I thought this was an enthralling film that really just shed a light on a lot of issues that I think people, they know about, but they don't really, it's not as easy as they may think, when something with an abusive relationship, and this film very much does get into it for sure. I really only think that there are some flashbacks in this movie that I would have wanted to see a little bit more of. I think they kind of gloss over some things that I would have wanted to see more of, but overall, I thought this was a really great film, and it's one I definitely encourage you guys to seek out as soon as you can. Definitely going to give this one a B. Intruder was basically what I expected to be. This is such a dumb and just ridiculous concept, especially just the second that Dennis Quaid's character is introduced. I mean, you can tell there's something off about him. The fact that Megan Good finds him so intriguing and genuinely finds him, you know, welcoming in a sense is absolutely ridiculous. And I usually really like Megan Good, but she is a fucking idiot in this movie. Like, she is easily one of the dumbest characters of the year. There's so many points where it's so obvious that he wants to be with her sexually, that he wants to do something really violent, but for some reason she overlooks it. She sees the good in him. I don't understand why, but she sees the good in him. Even though he has tons of holes in his story and things like that, she sees the good in him. But it also doesn't help that these characters are not very likable. Megan Good's husband, for example, in the film, is not really someone that Michael Ealy's character I don't really like all that much. I mean, on one hand, sure, he is very protective of her, but on the other hand, every single woman he comes across, he seems to be flirting with. He seems to not shy away from making these passes at women when he's supposed to be in a very serious relationship with Megan Good's character, and I don't really know what that's about at all. It makes you increasingly hard to really like him and root for him as a character. The friend of them I thought was really bad. He definitely is the most rational out of all the characters. Like, he's the one who definitely has a brain for sure, and there were definitely moments where I'm like, yeah, Joseph Sikora's character, he knows what he's talking about for sure. But honestly, this movie, really, there's not much to recommend except for Dennis Quaid. I thought Dennis Quaid was fantastic here. He knows exactly the kind of movie he's in. Now, look, is it a good performance? No. I mean, it's not. He's completely over the top. There are moments in the third act of this movie where he's basically just acting like a full-on, like, feral sort of animal, and it's absolutely hilarious to watch. But I got a kick out of it. I really did. I got a real kick out of him just being absolutely insane, and I thought he did a very good job of it. If I had to vote for, like, best guilty pleasure performance, Dennis Quaid would win right now, fair and square. I mean, I thought he was absolutely hysterical here. The problem really is the rest of the film. The third act, like I said, I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. I did not care that what was going on was so nonsensical because I honestly was getting into it. I thought it was just so stupid, and I saw it in the theater where there really weren't that many people, so I was laughing, like, very hard. It was absolutely hilarious. But the first two acts are so boring. There are so many moments where it's like, are you really this dumb? How can you be this dumb? It is so obvious that this guy is not a good person. It is so obvious that this guy is trying to stalk you. It is so obvious what's actually happening. There's so many directions that are so predictable. I actually have a friend who, you know, on 22 Tiger, I did a video on 22 Tiger. He's like least anticipated. I was on that video, and one of my good one of my good friends on there, he actually had a checklist of like how this movie's going to go down. He pretty much got everything right. I mean, if you go into this movie, you pretty much know what it's going to be. It's not really anything different than that. The ending also just might be the most abrupt ending I've seen so far this year. I really hated this a lot. I thought it was very annoying. I thought it was very obvious. The third act does somewhat save it, but even at that, I can't even say like I enjoyed it. It was more just I enjoyed laughing at it because of how stupid it really was. But overall, it's just a really bad movie. I really hope Screen Gems stops making these movies, but considering how much money this film made, which it made much more money than I expected it to, I really don't see them stopping anytime soon. This one's like a D. You know what this is. Not much more to say there. JT Leroy, I thought, had a lot of promise behind it. I mean, you have Kristen Stewart, you have Laura Dern, two actresses that I very much do respect. You have a concept that I think is very interesting, but also I think is very enlightening for people who are in the, like, trans community and things like that. Of this woman who wasn't trans, but she pretended to be a trans person. The fact that she was able to get away with it for as long as she is, there's a lot we can say that, you know, in modern times just wouldn't fly then. The problem is who the movie is centered on. The movie is not centered on the person that created this identity and created this, you know, person that isn't real. It's focused on the person that played the part of JT Leroy, and unfortunately, that character is just not very interesting. I don't think that, you know, as much as Stewart tries, which she really does try to bring something to this role, there just isn't a lot to her. She's a lesbian. She starts to have feelings for, well, at least she lesbian or bi, I couldn't really tell, but clearly she has feelings for Diane Kruger's character. She starts to feel for her, and basically because she's JT, she knows that, you know, she doesn't know if what she has with her is real, if she genuinely cares about her. But that's really all we get with her. Like, there just isn't much going on with her character-wise. Laura Dern, on the other hand, there's a lot more going on with her, because she actually created this identity, and she is the one who is forcing Stewart to play the part. And I wish we focused on her, because right into the film, this character's already been created. JT Leroy is already a real thing. We don't have any prior connection. We just know that Dern writes JT Leroy. But what was her inspiration? Like, why did she do this? That's something that this film could have very much got into, but they just really didn't. And that's ultimately the problem with this film, is that it just doesn't tell a very interesting story. It's not very riveting. It's not very captivating. It's not boring, because again, the film very heavily relies on the two actresses, who are great in their roles, and they both do a very good job, but it just doesn't say much. It doesn't do much of anything, and I feel like a story like this, it should be telling me something. It should be doing something that really gets me to be like, how the fuck did that happen? Like, I should be upset that this was a thing. I should be very engrossed into this story, but the fact that I wasn't was very disappointing for sure. So again, this one's like a C. Didn't hate it or anything, just wanted a lot more from it overall. Wine Country is easily one of the most annoying films of the entire year. This is the definition of one of those films where Amy Poehler, she had a bunch of friends that she clearly does respect, and she's like, you know what, guys, we're hanging out, we're on vacation, let's make a movie. It's worked out so well for Adam Sandler, let's make a movie. Except, here's the thing, and I know you guys are gonna be like, really, Kevin, you're defending this. Adam Sandler and, Grown Ups, they actually give a good reason for all these friends to come back together. Because this is just like Grown Ups, where, these guys, they haven't seen each other for a very long time. They are work friends. They're not childhood friends, but they are work friends, and they've been away for a little bit, and now they're trying to come back together. Grown-ups, there's a good reason, though. Their coaches died, and they're trying to come back together because of that. Here, there's not really much of a reason other than, they really don't come back here for any rhyme or reason other than Amy Poehler just simply wants them to. And it's just not very strong. None of these characters have really anything to do. A lot of them feel like they are very, very underutilized, for sure. Maya Rudolph especially, I thought she was so wasted here. There's really not much of anything for her to do other than for her to just, talk about how terrible, she is, how terrible she is as a mother and things like that. Anna Gasteyer has nothing to do here other than just talking to Siri constantly, which I thought was really annoying. Rachel Dratch has nothing to do. Amy Poehler is extremely annoying here. She's just this prissy character that constantly is complaining about things that are completely out of her control, and it's really annoying. Tina Fey is maybe the worst I've ever seen her. I don't want to get into the kind of character she's playing, but she was annoying. I hated her. I couldn't really stand anyone in this movie. I thought they were all just really bad. I will say I didn't think all of them were terrible. Like, I didn't think the actresses, in terms of their acting, I didn't think their acting was terrible. They're utilizing their talents as best as they can. There definitely was some potential, for sure. The problem is, the film is very gag after gag, and then the third act, they finally decide to have a story, but it's far too late, and where they end up going with the story is absolutely ridiculous. It's so predictable, it's very emotionally manipulative, and just in general, I did not get into it at all. It's about as annoying as I expect it to be, and just isn't worth your time at all. It just, don't see this one. Amy Poehler, I'm sure she can be a good director, but this is definitely not a good start at all. D for Wine Country. Not one of the worst of the year, but for sure one of the most annoying. Now, A Dog's Journey, as you guys know, I thought A Dog's Purpose was decent. It was a nice, sweet, cute little movie. I did think it was quite underwritten at points, but overall, I thought it was really well done. This one, I pretty much think is just as good as the first, although I do think it does things a little bit better. The main thing this one does better is that it has a much more coherent story. The first one did for the first hour, and then it felt like it kind of lost a sense of what its story really was. This one, on the other hand, it's a very simple story. You have Bailey the dog, and you have the character of CJ. CJ's this little girl. She really is not in a very good, state. Family-wise, her mother is very emotionally abusive. She's not around a lot, and you have Ethan and Hannah, who at first seem like they're taking care of her, but then something happens, and Betty Gilpin dries off, and basically, before Bailey dies, Dennis Quaid tells him, you have to go protect her. So basically, that's the story. It's him trying to protect CJ, CJ, and that story is pretty well done. They do a good job of fleshing out CJ's character, you know, what she's going through, her trying to get away from this really contentious relationship and her trying to venture out and the sort of problems that she endures, and they do a good job with that for the most part. I really liked Abby Ryder-Fortson. I thought Catherine Prescott was really good here. I forgot how good of an actress she really is. I haven't seen her in quite a while, but I thought she was very good here for sure. I thought overall she definitely did a really good job. Josh Gad is still very good as the dog. I thought his voiceover was still really well done. And Dennis Quaid, you know, he definitely does a good job. He's not in the movie that much, but he still does do a very good job here. The problem with this movie is that it is very, very black and white in the sense where characters in this movie, they're either really bad or they're really good. There really is no middle ground. CJ, for example, she basically is just this really good person. She doesn't really do, well, I mean, there are times where she's doing things wrong, but a lot of the time it's just because she needs someone in her life. And they do a good job with that message, I will say that. Like, I like the message of why she needs this dog. It's much less of just a man's best friend sort of thing and more of that she has someone that she can rely on emotionally that isn't in her family, and that she has this trusted companion, and they do a good job with that. The problem is Betty Gilpin throughout a lot of this movie is just unlikable. Like, she's not even unlikably, you know, like love to hate. She's just a character you absolutely hate. She's still doing a really good job, but for the most part, I mean, this character, there's no humanity in her. They do eventually give her a redemption arc, but it comes very late into the film. It does work because of how good Gilpin is, but it just takes a while for you to really get behind this character. There are a lot of moments that feel very emotionally manipulative, particularly one direction they take CJ's friend in that I thought was just so ridiculous. It felt so inconsequential to the overall story. It really was just there just to tug at your heartstrings, and it really didn't work that well at all. And then, like I said, a lot of the characters here, they're very, very unlikable. CJ's boyfriend as well, I really didn't like that much either. Her friend I like, but her boyfriend, like, I really didn't like that much. I will say, though, as emotionally manipulative as it is, the ending kind of got me. It honestly did. The ending did kind of get me. I didn't tear up, but I definitely got a little choked up. I definitely got invested into what they were doing. It's a good way to conclude it. I will say right now, this is definitely the last one in the series. Like, I don't think there's going to be another one after this because of the way they end things, but if it is, it's a good conclusion. I actually thought they ended things quite well, and, you know, even if some people thought it was cheesy, it got me. Like, it might be corny, but it honestly did get me, and I think they did a good job with that overall. Like I said, I think it's about as good as the first one is. It really is heightened by its acting, all of which are very good here. There aren't really any, well, there are a couple performances that are a bit questionable, but the lead characters, all of them really do a great job here, so I definitely will give it that. I think there are definitely some really cute moments in the film, and overall, it does tell a better story, but it still is going to get the same rating that I gave the first one, solely because I do think it is underwritten at points. I do think that some of the characters, they're too black and white for me. There are points where it does feel kind of lifetimey, but overall, I did enjoy it for the most part, and this one I would give also a B-, just like I did to the first one. The Perfection is yet another one that I think has a lot of really great ideas that I really do love. The problem is, once again, similar to See You Yesterday, it's just very underwritten. The movie starts off, and it's not very intriguing. I liked Allison Williams, I like Logan Browning, but the story just wasn't doing it for me. And then they pull out the rug. They really give you an idea of what's actually going on, and then I fucking loved it. I thought it was a really cool idea, and I really liked the story they're trying to tell. Mainly about just, you know, what people do in the industry to be perfect and what they do to make sure that they are the best at what they can do. Not just in the sense of, like, music stuff, but just in general. It was a really great social commentary on competition. And then they do another twist, and that one did not work for me in the slightest. I thought that it was extremely rushed. I understood what they were trying to do, but they just did not do enough in the beginning to warrant this twist. They did not do enough to set up, like, how this can actually work. I like what they're trying to say. I really do, but what they set up in the first twist is not at all where I thought they were going to go here. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it makes sense. It's not that it doesn't make sense. It does make sense. It's just they needed a lot more time to fully develop, this specific conflict, and they really don't. It feels like at one point they're telling one story, and now all of a sudden they're telling a different story. And again, I appreciate its ambition. I really do. This is a very different film. It's not at all what you think it's going to be. It's sort of a hybrid of, like, if I really had to say like what it is, it's sort of a hybrid of, say, a Black Swan or other sort of Darren Aronofsky films, a little bit of David Lynch in there as well. It's really kind of a hybrid of those two things, and they do a good job with that overall. Like, it is definitely the right tone. Allison Williams and Logan Browning are both very good here. Just overall, they needed a lot more time to dive into this specific conflict, and I just don't think they had enough time to do it. Therefore, it fell a bit flat for me. It's not terrible. In fact, there were moments where I was actually enjoying it, but just overall, I want a lot more. I'd give this one a C+, mainly because of the acting and its ambition, which I do very much appreciate. I just think they need a lot more time to really get me to buy into this overall. Rim of the World is easily one of the worst films I have seen all year. Holy shit, did I hate this. And I mean, I should have known. I mean, McGhie is behind it, who, I've said before, I don't know how he's in this industry. I really don't know how McGhie has gotten the success he is just by his name alone. The fact that people look at that and have taken that seriously is ridiculous to me. In this film, it has all the tropes you're expecting. It has the same sort of thing in The Babysitter, where you have some sort of kid, and he's just making all these references, and there's no rhyme or reason, they think it's funny. McGhie, for some reason, thinks it's funny for every single second for this kid to make some sort of reference. Benjamin Flores Jr., he's extremely annoying. I really couldn't stand him in this movie, and that's all he does. He just makes constant references, and I really couldn't stand it. You have tons of just adult humor that doesn't really work at all. There are moments in the movie that feels like a Nickelodeon movie, and then there are moments where it feels like it is trying to be more raunchy, and it doesn't really have a very good tone of that at all. It also doesn't help that none of these kids, aside from the main one, the main kid I actually did like. I thought he did a good job acting-wise. I can actually see him having a future, and I did like what they were setting up with him, but even at that, it's very underwritten. It's very, they give you the bare minimum of what you need to know with this character. The other guys, forget about it. There really isn't that much with them. They try to shove in things towards the end, but it doesn't really work very much at all. Like I said, Benjamin Flores Jr. is easily the worst here. The other kids I didn't hate necessarily, but I didn't really like them that much either. The main one I liked, but the other two I just thought were kind of fine. There is an extremely shoehorned romance in there. I'm not going to say who it is, but there's a very shoehorned romance in that I thought was just incredibly unbelievable, and they just did not do enough time. They just did not give enough time to warrant it, and that's the biggest problem with this movie, once again, is that there's not enough time to really latch onto these characters. There's not enough time to really understand this conflict. This whole idea of an alien invasion, it's not a bad one, but we've seen it done in way better films. The World's End, to name a few. You know, it's just one of those films where it's trying to capitalize off of other films. McGhee's cinematography here, it looks like a sci-fi movie. It looks so cheap, and it's very terribly made. The score's good. I did like the score. I'll give it that. I definitely did like the score overall, but the editing is terrible. It's very badly cut. There's so many scenes where either it goes on too long or it goes on too short. There are a lot of things that are just kind of dropped and don't make any sense. The ending is absolutely horrible. I hated the way the movie ended. There's so much I hate about this one. It's annoying, it's obnoxious, and it just makes me wonder, like, how McGhie is still in the business. I don't understand how this guy has gotten all the recognition he has, but either way, I've gone on long enough. It's terrible. It's basically everything I hate when it comes to a Netflix film. This one gets a D-. There really isn't much I like about it all, minus I said that kid and a couple other things, but that's kind of it. For the most part, this one's pretty much unbearable. And the final film that I am going to be talking about here is, of course, Long Day's Journey into Night. Now, this film, I was very excited for. I didn't really know a lot going into it, but I knew about the thing that everyone's going to be talking about, and that's that one take, the last 59 minutes, which is completely in one take. In some places, it's in 3D, and that was intriguing enough. I was excited to see the way this film would turn out, and I will say this is a good film. It's not a great film, and here's the problem I have with it. The first half of the movie, I think, is well done. I think it does tell a good. It's sort of like a mystery in a way where it's trying to be like a noir film, and it's this guy trying to get a lot of answers. It reminded me of Burning at points, but it's not as nearly as like thrilling, and it's not nearly as edge of your seat as like it is. It definitely tells a more simpler story than that. But again, that first half I thought overall was kind of up and down for me. There were things I liked, but then I thought there were scenes that just went on way too long. There were characters I just didn't really care about. There were too many characters, and I just didn't really. I cared about it, but I needed a little bit more from it. Once those last 59 minutes came in, I pretty much adored it. And those last 59 minutes alone could basically be its own short film. It tells a very good story. I really liked the main actor here. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I feel like I'm going to butcher it if I do, but I thought he was fantastic. I thought he gave a very good performance here for sure. And the main actress as well. I thought those two had very good chemistry. But those last 59 minutes, like I said, that is why you see this film. It is so mesmerizing to behold. There are so many moments where like they could easily cut, but they don't, and it's that much more impressive that they don't. I really do give it to the camera work here, the fact that they did keep it that way. And this is not like a Birdman where they're fooling you. Like, no, this is very much, like, you can tell this is very much a long take. Like, they never cut, and they do an excellent job with that. The story really does become something else entirely, though, and I think they do a very good job with that. My only flaw with that, as much as I do love the last 59 minutes, which I think it's fantastic, the cinematography especially is a delight here. It's so vibrant and beautiful. There's so many amazing shots in this film. And just in general, it's worth seeing alone for those last 59 minutes, and I think they do a really great job with that. The thing is, though, I don't really know how those last 59 minutes tie into the story we got before. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it really works as one overall film, but I am willing to overlook it because of how much I adored those last 59 minutes. Like I said, the first hour and a half, it's okay. It's not bad or anything. I do think that it is an interesting story, but it is very up and down. It's really those last 59 minutes that do save it, though. I think that is the best part of the movie easily. I think that's the thing the most people are going to talk about. That's why people are going to go to this film, and that's enough a reason to go. It's one of the best things you will see visually. It's a film where if you can see it in theaters, you absolutely should. This is not a film to wait on for VOD. I feel like if you don't see it in theaters, you're not going to get the same impact. Unfortunately, I didn't see it in 3D, but if you can, definitely do so, because I'm sure it would look stunning based on what they end up doing. They employ a lot here. I really do applaud the director here for taking such a leap with this movie. It's such a huge shift, but it really is one that I got behind very quickly just because of how much I loved what they were setting up here. I think it's such a great idea. I think that there's a lot that they did here that I really did love. By again, I'm not really familiar with his work, but I definitely do want to see more from him after this because I really did like what we got here for sure. I've heard a lot of good things about Collie Blues and things like that, which I definitely will check out after this. But overall, I really did like this one quite a lot. Like I said, I can't say I loved it because that first half, I was into it, but it's a little bit confusing for me. Honestly, I feel like on a rewatch, I'll have a firmer grasp of how I really feel about the first half of this movie, but those last 59 minutes, man, I adored them, and they're enough for a reason to check out this film. So this one I'm definitely going to give a B. I can't recommend enough. It's definitely, probably, even if you don't like the film, the last 59 minutes, I think, is going to win you over. I think that's something that you are really going to appreciate, and I think just in general, it's one of the most unique experiences you'll see out of any film this year, and I just cannot praise enough for that alone. And with that, guys, we have made it to the end here. Those are all of the films that I have been meaning to review, but just have not been able to. Either way, guys, that's it for this catch-up video. I am definitely going to have more. I mean, this summer, there's a lot of films that are coming out, and there's definitely a lot that I still need to catch up on. So there'll definitely be another one coming at the end of the summer, just like last year. So definitely look forward to that. Let me know what you guys think of any of these movies. If you have seen them, love to hear your thoughts on them, of course. Of course, in the description, I will post each of the timestamps for when I talk about each of these films if you guys just want to go to that. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.